hung in the briefing room at Camp Lejeune like a bad joke. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hayes, Marine Raiders Special Operations Commander, looked around the room at faces that ranged from confused to skeptical. The mission parameters on the screen behind him showed a coastal compound in Somalia where 3 American aid workers were being held by Al-Shabaab militants. Standard approach: impossible. The compound sat on a narrow peninsula, surrounded by water on 3 sides, with clear sight lines for 400 meters in every direction. Staff Sergeant Kira Morgan, the unit's combat diving instructor, sat in the back row, her notebook open, pen moving across the page as she sketched the compound's water approaches. She was 31 years old, with sun-bleached brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and the kind of weathered tan that came from spending more time in the ocean than on land. "How deep?" she asked quietly, not looking up from her sketch. The room went silent. 12 Marine Raiders turned to stare at her. Captain Marcus Webb, the assault team leader, laughed, a short, uncomfortable sound. "You're serious right now?" Kira finally looked up, her gray-green eyes meeting his without challenge or defensiveness. The compound's eastern approach has a natural depression in the seabed. From the satellite bathymetry, looks like 12 to 15 feet at high tide. Decent concealment if the water's murky. So I'll ask again, how deep do you need the shot? Colonel Hayes studied her for a long moment. Staff Sergeant Morgan, you teach Marines how to not drown. We're talking about a precision shooting problem. With respect, sir, I teach Marines how to operate in water. There's a difference, and you asked if anyone could shoot from underwater. I'm asking for mission parameters. What they didn't know, what nobody in that room except Hayes knew because he'd read her classified file before the briefing, was that her father had been Master Chief Daniel Morgan, a Navy SEAL who'd spent 15 years developing subsurface weapons tactics before an IED in Ramadi took his life, or that Kira had grown up on naval bases from Coronado to Little Creek, learning to free dive before she learned to drive, or that the swimming instructor qualification was a deliberate cover for skills that only a handful of operators in the U.S. military possessed. Kira Morgan had been training in cold water since she was 12 years old. By 16, she could hold her breath for 5 minutes and shoot a water-sealed rifle at 30 feet depth. Her father had taught her something most people never considered. Water doesn't stop bullets. It just changes the rules. The mission brief was straightforward on paper, impossible in execution. 3 American aid workers, 2 doctors and a logistics coordinator had been taken from a medical clinic in Mogadishu 6 days ago. Intelligence placed them in a coastal compound 40 kilometers north, held by an Al-Shabaab cell led by a former Somali military officer named Hassan Osman. The compound was a killing field by design. Perched on a rocky peninsula, it had clear fields of fire in every direction. Guard towers covered the land approaches. The water was too shallow for submarine delivery, too exposed for surface craft. Previous rescue attempts by other nations had ended in disaster. 4 French commandos killed in 2019. 2 British SAS wounded in 2021. We've got 48 hours before they move the hostages inland, Hayes continued. Once they're in the interior, we lose them. Air assault is suicide. They'll hear the helicopters from 5 miles out. Ground approach means crossing 400 meters of open terrain under fire. That leaves water. The eastern approach, Kira said, sketching as she spoke. High tide is 0300 hours. Current runs south to north at 1.2 knots. There's a natural channel, probably carved by runoff, that provides cover to within 200 meters of the compound. From there, she paused, calculating. From there, it's a shooting problem. Captain Webb shook his head. A shooting problem 12 feet underwater in darkness with a rifle that probably won't even fire properly. This isn't a training pool, Morgan. This is the Indian Ocean with God knows what visibility. Actually, she said calmly, with proper weapon modification and ammunition selection, you can achieve effective fire to 25 feet at shallow depth. Beyond that, physics gets problematic. But for 12 to 15 feet, manageable. You're talking about modified weapons we don't have and ammunition that doesn't exist in our inventory. Kira reached into her bag and pulled out a waterproof case. Inside was a customized HK-416 with a shortened barrel, specialized suppressor, and a trigger group that had been extensively modified. This is a weapon system my father developed. I've been refining it for 15 years. And the ammunition? She produced a magazine filled with subsonic rounds in waterproof casings. I load myself, 147 grain-jacketed hollow points sealed and weighted for subsurface ballistics. The room stared. Hayes allowed himself a small smile. Staff Sergeant Morgan isn't just a diving instructor, he said. She holds 3 classification levels I can't discuss in this room. Her father wrote the manual on underwater combat that DevGru still uses, and she's been asking me for 2 years to let her prove the concept in real operations. Webb's expression shifted from dismissive to calculating. You're telling me she can infiltrate underwater, hold position in current, and take precision shots from beneath the surface? I'm telling you she's the only person in the U.S. military who can, Hayes replied. The question is whether we're desperate enough to try something this unconventional. After the briefing, Kira stood alone on the beach behind the Special Operations Training Compound, watching the Atlantic roll in. Her phone buzzed, a text from her younger brother, a Marine infantry officer stationed at Pendleton. Mom's asking when you're coming home. Says you never call. She smiled sadly. Home. She'd spent so much time in water that land felt foreign now. The ocean was where her father's ghost lived, where his lessons echoed in every current, every breath, every moment of stillness beneath the surface. Her father's last words to her, spoken from a hospital bed in Germany before infection took him, had been simple. The water remembers everything we teach it, Kira. Don't let them forget. For 10 years, she'd operated in shadows, teaching basic diving to Marines while conducting classified research into subsurface tactics. She'd perfected techniques her father had only theorized. She'd learned to shoot in zero visibility, to navigate by current alone, to become part of the ocean itself. And now, finally, she had a chance to prove that all those years weren't wasted. Captain Webb found her there an hour later. He approached quietly, military bearing evident even in casual stance. Colonel wants you on the assault team, he said without preamble. But I need to understand what you're actually proposing, not the technical specs, the reality. Can you really do this? Kira picked up a stone and tossed it into the water. You ever shoot underwater, Captain? Can't say I have. Most people assume bullets stop dead the moment they hit water. They don't. They tumble, they lose velocity rapidly, but they don't stop. The problem is aim. Water refracts light, distorts distance, moves constantly. You can't use conventional sighting systems. So how do you aim? You don't. Not the way you're thinking. You learn to feel the shot, read the current, understand the bullet's behavior in water, trust geometry over optics. She turned to face him. My father spent 15 years figuring this out. I've spent another 15 refining it. I can hit a man-sized target at 40 feet underwater in darkness with current. I've done it 1,000 times in training. Now, I need to do it when it matters. Webb was quiet for a moment. The raiders who'll be on this mission, they're the best we have. They don't know you. They'll be skeptical. I don't need them to believe in me before the mission, Captain. Just after? The insertion plan came together over the next 36 hours. A small team, Kira plus 4 Marine raiders, would infiltrate via submarine to a position 2 kilometers offshore. From there, they'd use combat diver propulsion vehicles to close the distance underwater, approaching the compound from the east at high tide. Kira would establish a submerged position in the natural depression 200 meters from the compound. The raiders would move to a secondary position 400 meters out, ready to provide backup if the primary plan failed. The hostages were being held in the compound's main building, ground floor, eastern side. Intelligence showed 2 guards inside, 4 more in rotating exterior patrol, and Hassan Osman himself coordinating from a second-floor command post. The impossible part: Kira would need to neutralize the exterior guards from her underwater position before the assault team could move in. 4 targets, 4 shots, from 12 feet below the surface, in darkness, with the compound's lights reflecting off the water, destroying natural night vision. If you miss even one, Webb told her during their final planning session, they'll know we're here. The hostages die, and we're swimming home empty-handed. I won't miss, she said simply. The night before the mission, Kira performed her ritual. She always did this before operations, even training exercises. She'd strip her rifle completely, clean every component, reassemble it blind in darkness. Her father had taught her, know your weapon better than you know yourself. The HK-416 was a work of art, modified far beyond standard spec. The barrel had been shortened and matched to work with subsonic ammunition. The suppressor was a custom titanium design that functioned in water. The trigger had been lightened to 2.5 pounds and sealed against moisture. The magazine well had been modified to accept her custom waterproof magazines. Most critically, she'd added a laser designator that worked in water, a technology her father had pioneered but never perfected. It projected a low-power infrared beam that was invisible to human eyes but clear through her night vision optics, even underwater. Combined with years of training, it gave her an aiming system that worked when conventional sights were useless. She loaded 4 magazines, 120 rounds total. She'd need maybe 6 rounds for the mission, 4 targets, 2 backup shots. But her father's voice echoed, "Plan for the perfect op, pack for the catastrophic one." The submarine insertion was smooth. The USS Oklahoma City, a Los Angeles class attack sub, delivered them to the release point without detection. Kira and the 4 raiders locked out through the escape trunk at 22:17 hours, 2 kilometers off the Somali coast. The water was warmer than she expected, 78 degrees Fahrenheit. Clear, surprisingly, with visibility approaching 40 feet even at night. The moon was a thin crescent, providing just enough light to navigate by without being exposed. She activated her diver propulsion vehicle, a SEAL delivery system that looked like an underwater scooter, and began the slow approach to the target. The raiders followed in formation, their own DPVS leaving minimal wake. The swim took 47 minutes. Kira navigated by compass and by feel, reading the current, compensating for drift, staying 15 feet below the surface where the water was darkest. Twice she felt the pressure wave of a boat passing overhead, probably fishing vessels, unaware of the operators below. At 23:04 hours, she reached her position. The natural depression in the seabed was exactly where the satellite imagery had shown it, 12 feet deep, with rocky outcrops that provided visual concealment and current breaks. She settled into position, anchoring herself with a small weight bag attached to her belt. Her HK-416 came out of its waterproof case smoothly. She'd practiced this movement 10,000 times, drawing the weapon, assuming firing position, all while maintaining neutral buoyancy and minimal movement. Through her night vision goggles, the compound glowed green. 4 guards on patrol, exactly as expected. 2 on the seawall facing the water, 2 circling the main building. Hassan Osman was visible through a second-floor window, moving back and forth, probably coordinating communications. The raiders checked in via underwater communications. "Overwatch, this is Assault Actual. In position." Kira clicked her transmit button twice, acknowledged. "Overwatch, we're holding at 400 meters. Execute when ready." This was it. Everything her father had taught her, everything she'd trained for, compressed into the next 60 seconds. She adjusted her position slightly, letting the current settle. Her breathing slowed, a meditative state she'd learned from free diving. Heart rate dropped from 75 to 52 beats per minute. The ocean became an extension of her body. Target 1, guard on the eastern seawall, 187 feet away, elevation 8 feet above water. The geometry was complex, bullet trajectory and water curves dramatically, exits water at unpredictable angle, then continues in air with altered ballistics. But she'd done this math so many times it was instinctive. She activated her laser designator. The invisible beam cut through the water, touched the guard's center mass. She compensated for refraction, for the bullet's behavior at the water-air interface, for wind above the surface. Exhale, hold. Between heartbeats, squeeze. The HK-416 bucked in her hands, the recoil strange and muted underwater. Through her optics, she watched the subsonic round cut through water, break the surface in a tiny spray of foam, and impact the guard's chest. He dropped without a sound. Target 2 was already moving, alerted by his partner's fall. But he was looking in the wrong direction, scanning the landward approaches, not the water. She tracked him smoothly, adjusted for his movement, fired, second guard down. The 2 remaining guards were on the western side of the compound, out of her line of sight from the water. But her father had taught her to think 3-dimensionally. There was a reflection in the compound's second-floor windows, faint, distorted, but present. She'd never tried this shot in real operations, but in training, using mirrored surfaces to engage indirect targets, Her success rate was 60%. Better than nothing. She watched the window reflection, calculated angles, compensated for the double distortion, water and glass. The third guard's reflection appeared. She aimed at where his body should be in physical space, firing at a target she couldn't directly see. The shot broke clean. The reflection jerked and disappeared. The fourth guard broke from cover, running toward the main building, shouting. He'd realized the attack was coming from the water. He was raising an AK-47, firing blind toward the ocean. Kira tracked him calmly. He was moving fast, maybe 12 miles per hour, crossing her field of fire from left to right. She led him by 6 feet, compensating for his speed, for the bullet's water trajectory, for everything. The shot took him mid-stride. He collapsed 10 feet from the building entrance. 52 seconds, 4 guards, 4 shots. Overwatch, assault actual, exterior clear. Say again, exterior clear. How the hell did you... Focus on the mission, Captain, Kira transmitted. Hostages are still inside. The raiders moved in fast now, their DPVS propelling them toward the compound beach. They'd rehearsed this 100 times. Explosive breach on the ground floor, clear rooms in sequence, extract hostages, exfil via water to the submarine pickup point. But something was wrong. Through her optics, Kira saw Hassan Osman moving rapidly in the second-floor command post. He was on a radio, and he was pulling a sidearm from his desk. Assault actual. Advise you have 1 hostile second floor, command post. He's armed and possibly calling for reinforcements. Copy. Can you take the shot? Kira calculated quickly. Hassan was 35 feet above the water, behind glass, moving unpredictably. The angle from her position was severe, nearly 60 degrees. The bullet would have to exit water, climb through air at sharp angle, penetrate window glass, and still retain enough energy to neutralize the target. Negative. Angle is too steep. You'll need to... Hassan appeared at the window, looking down at his fallen guards. And then his eyes tracked to the water. Somehow, impossibly, he saw her, or saw something. Maybe the faint disturbance from her position, maybe the laser designator's reflection, maybe just instinct. He raised his pistol, aiming down at the water, at the hostages' room below him. He was going to execute them rather than let them be rescued. Kira didn't think, didn't calculate. Her father's voice. Sometimes the perfect shot is the one you don't have time to plan. She adjusted her aim vertically, compensating for the extreme angle. Fired 3 rounds in rapid succession, bracketing shots, hoping one would find the geometry that worked. The first round exited the water at too shallow an angle, missing completely. The second hit the window frame, shattering glass but missing Hassan. The third round caught him in the shoulder as he was pulling the trigger. His shot went wild, punching into the ceiling. He spun, dropped the pistol, collapsed against the wall. Target down, Kira transmitted. Second floor secure. The breach went perfectly after that. The raiders hit the ground floor, neutralized the 2 interior guards, and extracted all 3 hostages without further contact. Total time from first shot to exfil, 4 minutes, 22 seconds. Kira held position until the team was clear, then dissolved back into the ocean like she'd never been there. The swim back to the submarine pickup point took 40 minutes. She'd been submerged for a total of 2 hours, 14 minutes. When she finally surfaced inside the sub's escape trunk, hands reached down to pull her up. Captain Webb was there, water dripping from his own wetsuit, a look on his face she'd never seen before. That third shot, he said, the one that took down Hassan, you fired through water at a 60-degree angle, through glass, and hit a moving target 35 feet above you. The ballistics guys are going to lose their minds when they see the after-action footage. Kira pulled off her mask, breathing hard. Did the hostages make it? All 3. Safe on the sub. Morgan, what you just did was my job, sir. No, what you just did was rewrite the manual on what's possible. Back at Camp Lejeune, the operation was classified at the highest levels. The hostages were debriefed and returned to their families with cover stories about diplomatic negotiations. The dead al-Shabaab fighters were attributed to an internal dispute. The world never knew how close the rescue had come to disaster, or how one Marine's impossible shots from beneath the ocean had changed everything. But within the special operations community, word spread differently. The water ghost had succeeded. 1 week after the mission, Colonel Hayes called Kira into his office. She found him with 2 other officers she didn't recognize, both wearing insignia that suggested they operated at levels above her clearance. "Staff Sergeant Morgan," Hayes began, "I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Chen from MARSOC and Commander James Patterson from Naval Special Warfare Development Group." Kira stood at attention, uncertain where this was going. Commander Patterson spoke first. "We've reviewed your mission footage, all of it, including the body camera feeds from the raiders and your own helmet cam. What you accomplished in Somalia represents a fundamental shift in how we think about littoral operations." "Sir, I was just applying techniques your father pioneered a concept," Colonel Chen interrupted. "You perfected it. There's a difference. Right now, we have exactly one person in the U.S. military who can execute subsurface precision fire. That's a strategic vulnerability. We want you to train others," Patterson continued. "Not just Marines, SEALs, Raiders, combat controllers, anyone who operates in maritime environments. We're establishing a new training pipeline. Subsurface tactical operations. You'll design the curriculum, select the candidates, build the program from the ground up." Kira's mind raced. "Sir, with respect, what I do requires years of specialized training, the diving skills alone, which is why we're giving you 5 years to build the program, and full resources, personnel, equipment, funding, whatever you need. Your father spent his career trying to convince leadership that underwater combat was possible. You proved it. Now we need you to scale it." That evening, Kira returned to the beach behind the training compound. She carried a waterproof case containing her father's original notes, hundreds of pages of calculations, diagrams, theories about subsurface ballistics. She'd kept them locked away for 10 years, unable to look at them without feeling the weight of his loss. But tonight, she opened the case and began reading. On the first page, in her father's distinctive handwriting, "To Kira, the ocean keeps our secrets, but only if we respect its rules. Teach others to listen to what the water says. Make them understand that the impossible is just the possible that nobody's tried yet. Love, Dad." Tears blurred her vision. She'd spent a decade hiding, teaching basic skills, waiting for permission to use what he'd taught her. Now she had that permission. More than that, she had a mission. 3 months later, the first class of the Subsurface Tactical Operations course began. 15 students, SEALs, Marine Raiders, Air Force Special Tactics, all volunteers, all skeptical. Kira stood before them in the briefing room, the same room where she'd once been dismissed as just a swimming instructor. "Most of you think underwater shooting is science fiction," she began. "You're wrong. It's just science. The question is whether you're willing to learn a completely new way of thinking about ballistics, about shooting, about what's possible when you stop fighting the water and start working with it." One SEAL, a senior chief with multiple combat deployments, raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, we've all heard stories about your Somalia op, but stories get exaggerated. How do we know this isn't just hype?" Kira smiled. "Valid question. Let me show you." She led them to the training pool, Olympic-sized, 15 feet deep at the far end. A ballistic gelatin target had been positioned underwater, 30 feet from the pool's edge. She geared up in full combat diving rig, loaded her HK-416, and submerged without ceremony. The students watched through the pool's underwater viewing windows. From 12 feet deep, in full gear, with instructors creating artificial current by swimming nearby, Kira took 3 shots at the gelatin target, all 3 grouped within a 4-inch circle, center mass. When she surfaced, the senior chief was standing at the pool's edge, shaking his head in disbelief. "How is that even possible? Week 1, I'll teach you why it's possible. Week 8, you'll do it yourself. Week 16, you'll do it in darkness, in current, while under simulated stress. By graduation, you'll do it when lives depend on it." She climbed out of the pool, water streaming from her gear. "My father spent his whole career developing these techniques. I've spent mine perfecting them. Now I'm passing them forward, not because I want recognition, but because operators like you need every possible advantage. Sometimes the mission requires you to shoot from where your enemy thinks you can't. That's what I'm here to teach you." The course was brutal. 15 started, 8 graduated. Those 8 became the nucleus of a new capability that would change special operations doctrine. Over the next 3 years, Kira trained 47 operators in subsurface tactical shooting. They deployed to operations in the Philippines, Yemen, the Persian Gulf, and the Baltic Sea. In situations where conventional approaches failed, they succeeded. They called themselves Morgan's Ghosts, operators who could materialize from water, complete impossible missions, and disappear again without trace. But Kira never sought the spotlight. She taught, she refined techniques, she pushed the boundaries of what water operations could achieve. When journalists tried to interview her about Somalia, she declined. When military awards were proposed, she redirected credit to her teams. There was only one recognition she cared about. 5 years after Somalia, on the anniversary of her father's death, she returned to the beach at Little Creek, where he'd first taught her to shoot underwater. She was alone, carrying his original training rifle, the one he'd modified by hand, testing theories nobody else believed in. She loaded one round, waded into the water, submerged to 10 feet, and fired at a target she'd placed 40 feet away. Perfect center hit. She surfaced, looking up at the sky. Somewhere, she knew her father was watching. Proud not because she'd proven him right, but because she'd done what he'd always taught her to do: take the impossible and make it routine. The water kept its secrets, but it also kept its promises. Staff Sergeant Kira Morgan taught 200 more operators over the next decade. She rose to Master Sergeant, then Sergeant Major. She never stopped refining techniques, never stopped pushing what subsurface tactics could achieve. But she never forgot the lesson that mattered most. Excellence doesn't announce itself. It demonstrates when the moment demands it, from 12 feet below the surface, in darkness, with lives hanging in the balance, one shot at a time. You can support us by subscribing to our channel and liking the video for more stories like this. Don't forget to write which city you're watching from in the comments. See you in the next story.